This podcast is brought to you by Intranaturals, a brand whose non-GMO, GMP certified, and vegan supplements are getting praise from parents across the country. People's Pharmacy listeners get 25% off their first order using the code PEOPLES25 at intranaturals.com. That's code PEOPLES25 for 25% off INTRA naturals.com. Many people think of video games as a waste of time. Could they instead help us develop skills that will make our lives better? This is the People's Pharmacy with Terry and Joe Graydon.
Dr. Jane McGonigal is a senior researcher at the Institute for the Future in Palo Alto, California. When she suffered a severe concussion, her world was turned upside down. Creating a game called Jane the Concussion Slayer helped her overcome the depression, fatigue, and headaches that immobilized her.
Can playing games help you learn to control your attention, mobilize support, and motivate yourself to overcome health challenges?
Coming up on the People's Pharmacy, find out how you could use a gameful mindset to become SuperBetter.
First, the news.
In the People's Pharmacy Health Headlines, a German study has revealed another potential risk of taking certain popular heartburn drugs over the long term. The study, published this week in JAMA Neurology, found that PPI users were 44% more likely to develop dementia over the 7 years of the study. The researchers reviewed medical records from more than 73,000 older people. Nearly 3,000 of them filled prescriptions for drugs such as omeprazole, lansoprazole, or esomeprazole on a regular basis. These medicines are better known by their brand names, Prilosec, Prevacid, and Nexium. The analysis showed an association between such proton pump inhibitors and the risk of dementia. It did not show that the drugs caused dementia. Nonetheless, an accompanying editorial points out that PPIs may impact brain enzymes that could impact the formation of plaques and tangles. Lower levels of vitamin B12 might also increase the risk for cognitive decline. If this association holds up to further scrutiny, it could result in an increase of about 10,000 new cases of incident dementia per year just in this age group, people between 75 and 84 years of age.
A very old drug derived from the foxglove plant may turn out to be surprisingly effective against heart disease. Digitalis has been used for hundreds of years to treat heart failure, a condition in which the heart no longer is able to pump blood efficiently. In recent years, this drug has fallen out of favor, but it's still prescribed for an irregular heart rhythm called atrial fibrillation. Now, researchers have discovered that this old heart medicine has the ability to lower cholesterol by 41%, LDL cholesterol by 20%, and triglycerides by 54% in mice. In addition, digoxin suppresses inflammation that contributes to plaque in arteries. The authors conclude that their results provide convincing evidence that digoxin exerts protective effects against atherosclerosis. Perhaps it's time for cardiologists to take another look at the value of digoxin in preventing heart disease.
People with fibromyalgia may benefit from acupuncture treatment. Fibromyalgia is a condition characterized by pain in the muscles and soft tissues. Sleep disturbances, fatigue, depression, and tender trigger points are common symptoms as well. Although doctors treat fibromyalgia with drugs like Lyrica, Cymbalta, or Savella, people often continue to suffer. The study, conducted in Seville, Spain, included 153 patients with a history of fibromyalgia. They were randomized to receive either simulated acupuncture or personalized acupuncture for 20 minutes. Both groups received 9 weekly sessions. Those who got the real acupuncture needed less other medication compared to the group receiving sham acupuncture. After a year, those who had received true acupuncture had improved pain scores by 20% compared to 6% for the control group.
Immunotherapy against cancer has researchers excited. Over the last few years, a number of new drugs have been approved for hard-to-treat malignancies such as melanoma and lung cancer. They work by encouraging the immune system to better recognize and attack cancer. Now, a new type of immune-based treatment is showing extraordinary promise. Scientists remove the patient's own T cells and treat them so that they'll recognize his particular cancer markers. Then, the T cells are injected back into the patient. Preliminary results just reported at the annual meeting of the American Association for the Advancement of Science were encouraging. In one study of patients with acute lymphoblastic leukemia who had stopped responding to chemotherapy, 94% had their symptoms completely disappear. Patients with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma also had surprisingly good responses to T-cell therapy. While this line of research is still experimental, it is generating enthusiasm among normally cautious scientists. Stimulating the immune system comes with side effects, however. Some patients experience fever, low blood pressure, and neurological symptoms as a result of the immune system reaction. Nevertheless, immunotherapy may soon become one of the key approaches for hard-to-treat cancers. And that's the health news from the People's Pharmacy this week. Welcome to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. Most of us value concentration, focus, and the ability to think clearly. But in our fast-paced lives, it's easy to become distracted. Email, text messages, phone calls, and social media are all geared to pull our attention away from everyday tasks and responsibilities.
Are video games a problem or a way to improve our focus? To find out, we're talking with Dr. Jane McGonigal, a senior researcher at the Institute for the Future in Palo Alto, California. Her TED Talks on games have been viewed more than 10 million times, and her first book, Reality is Broken, was a bestseller. Her latest book is SuperBetter, a revolutionary approach to getting stronger, happier, braver, and more resilient, powered by the science of games.
Welcome to the People's Pharmacy, Dr. Jane McGonigal.
Thank you.
It's so nice to have you with us, but let's get the elephant out of the room first, if you don't mind. People hear about gaming.
Video games.
And they think, oh, man, that's a teenager, a boy, and he's playing, some kind of war game, and he's shooting all the bad guys, and it's blood and guts and explosions. And I know you get asked this question all the time. Why is that, kind of stereotype not what you're really talking about in SuperBetter?
Well, you know that there are more than 175 million people in the United States who play video games regularly, and half of them are women. In fact, there are more mom gamers than teenage boy gamers right now. So it's really a much more diverse demographic than people sometimes think. And there's so many genres of games that people are playing: social games, cooperative games, really amazing creative games. So we don't need to cling to that stereotype anymore.
Well, you point out that people have been playing games for a really long time. Even before there were computers, there were games. There still are games that don't require computers, and yet they still have some of the same components that you think are important. What's the definition of a game?
Well, every game is really an unnecessary obstacle that you are choosing to tackle. That's really the core element of games that helps us tap into strengths like creativity and determination and the ability to learn and get better, because we are accepting a goal that has been designed to be more difficult than it needs to be. Whether it's when you play golf, your goal is to get a small ball in a small hole, and instead of just walking up to it and putting the ball in the hole, you agree to stand really far away and use a stick, to aim the ball. Or you're playing a video game where the game has been designed with bad guys and obstacles and time limits and resource limits so that you're not going to have an easy time of achieving your goal. You're going to have to use all of your resources and skills to do it.
And the better you get, the harder it becomes, right?
That's right. That's especially true with video games. The game can really calibrate itself to your difficulty level, which means that one of the main benefits of video games in comparison to, say, a board game or a card game is that you're constantly learning and improving. That allows us to really derive more benefits from a video game than other forms.
Now, Dr. McGonigal, your doctorate is in performance studies. How in the world did you get drawn to game design and theory?
It's a really funny story. You know, I went to graduate school at UC Berkeley intending to study how physicists collaborate with each other and how they communicate science to the public. And I was going to do that in this field of performance studies using sort of anthropology research methods. And in my first year of graduate school, I just started observing that there were a lot of online game communities that were trying to use their in-game skills to help people in real life, to organize relief efforts, to try to solve problems, contribute ideas to the government, to scientists. And I just got really fascinated with the possibility that maybe, we have, at that point, it was about 500 million gamers. Now we have 1.23 billion gamers on the planet. And can we help them use their gameful strengths to accomplish real-world good? And so I convinced my advisors to let me study how gamers collaborate and solve problems instead of physicists. And I was very lucky they let me do that.
Now, when you start SuperBetter, you begin it by talking about the things that we need to lead a happy and fulfilled life. And you talk about 3 things: that you're stronger than you know, you're surrounded by potential allies, and you're the hero of your own story. And you say we can get all of these from games. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, actually, I would say it's not that we get any of these strengths from games. These are strengths that we're born with. Games help us practice them, develop them, access them. But I think it's really important for me to say that the game is not what gives you power. It's power you already have. And that's why I say you're already stronger than you know. You're surrounded by potential allies and you're the hero of your own story. This has to do with your ability to control your attention, which can help you control your thoughts and feelings even when you're under extreme stress or even in pain, and your ability to recruit others, to cooperate with others, to work together, and your ability to really make those social bonds and connections. That's something that you're able to do very effectively in games, but you can, develop that strength for everyday life. And the same goes for your ability to supercharge your motivation, your willpower, your compassion, all of these heroic qualities. Games just happen to be a very effective way to tap into them. But by no means do you need a game to practice them in everyday life.
Now, you had a personal experience that changed everything. So, several years as a game designer, but then you experienced a really bad concussion in 2009. Can you tell us what happened and why games changed your life?
Sure. Yeah. I had a really dumb household accident, hit my head on a piece of furniture, and I got a concussion that, most people think concussions heal in a few days, you're better in a week. But I found out that a lot of concussions can take a month or 3 months or even a year to heal. And that's actually how long it took my brain to get back to normal. It took a year. And during that time, I was basically still concussed. I had terrible headaches every day. I couldn't concentrate. I was forgetting things, forgetting people's names. I couldn't read or write, which I was in the middle of writing my first book at the time. So that made me very anxious. And I also suffered a lot of challenges like depression and anxiety, which partly because you're just depressed that you're stuck in bed and you can't do anything, but it's actually also a symptom of traumatic brain injury. The neurochemistry changes and I just feel depressed and anxious. And I was lucky enough that, having been researching the psychology of games for a decade already by that point. I'd finished my PhD. I'd created lots of games to study this phenomenon. I was able, even in that kind of foggy days, to think, well, if games help us solve problems more creatively, be more resilient, recruit allies more effectively, surely I should be able to use those strengths in this recovery process. And that's when I decided to try to be more gameful in how I was getting better. I became Jane, the concussion slayer. I started doing things like activating power-ups, things that would help me feel better, identifying my bad guys so that I could work with my friends and family to come up with creative battle plans. I started coming up with quests for myself that were things that were recommended by my doctor and just really making sure that I did it every day. And just adopting this gameful approach really helped me deal with that incredibly difficult period and with the depression in a way that activated, the optimism and the determination of gaming.
Now, you were so depressed at one point that you even had suicidal thoughts.
It's true. I didn't know this at the time, but 1 in 3 people with a traumatic brain injury, even a mild one like a concussion, 1 in 3 will go on to have suicidal ideation. It's not necessarily that you are thinking that your life is now so terrible that you want to die, but it's actually a result of the changes in the brain chemistry. And so that happened to me. I started to hear a voice, that said, Jane, you should kill yourself and you're never going to get better and you're going to be a burden to your husband. And I was fortunate enough that I could hear this voice and think, this isn't me. I don't think I actually feel this way. And it wasn't until my husband, he was an ally in my Jane the Concussion Slayer game, and I had him researching scientific articles on traumatic brain injury, and he's the one who found the first scientific paper that explained that suicidal ideation is a symptom of brain injury. And that was an amazing breakthrough for me because I could say, wow, this is not how I feel. This is not a rational decision that I want to die. This is just a symptom. And so it might not go away right away, but I don't have to believe that voice. I don't have to act on this or take it seriously. And that was a relief. But I think it's important for people to know that this can happen so that if it does happen to you or a loved one, to know that it's a symptom and it passes.
How long did it take for you to begin to see a difference after you started Jane the Concussion Slayer?
Within a few days, that fog of depression and anxiety really started to lift. By no means did it cure the actual symptoms, the headaches, that went on for the rest of the year. But that sense of powerlessness, of hopelessness, of kind of social isolation, that went away. And when that went away, I started to feel like myself again and, feel like even though I was still in pain, that I wasn't suffering in the same way.
You're listening to Dr. Jane McGonigal. She's a senior researcher at the Institute for the Future in Palo Alto, California. Her first book was Reality is Broken, Why Games Make Us Better and How They Can Change the World. Today, we're discussing her new book, SuperBetter, a revolutionary approach to getting stronger, happier, braver, and more resilient, powered by the science of games.
After the break, we'll find out more about Jane the Concussion Slayer.
What are power-ups, and how would you find them in real life?
We all love to win, but is there also an upside to losing?
Find out about the surprising health benefits of video games.
We'll get more details on SuperBetter, the game, and how it's played. What are the 7 rules, and how can playing SuperBetter help you with health challenges?
You're listening to The People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon.
If you like the information you hear when you listen to The People's Pharmacy, you may also enjoy our book published by National Geographic. It's The People's Pharmacy Quick and Handy Home Remedies, available online at peoplespharmacy.com or at your favorite bookstore.
Welcome back to The People's Pharmacy. I'm Terry Graydon.
And I'm Joe Graydon. The People's Pharmacy is brought to you in part by Intra Naturals Nutritional Supplements. Information on how they're redefining nutrition can be found at intranaturals.com.
And by Red X Industries, makers of utterly smooth creams and lotions that deeply moisturize to make dry skin feel soft and smooth. 800-345-7339. The website is uttercream.com.
If you'd like to order a CD of this show, you can call 800-732-2334. Today's show is number 1025. That number again, 800-732-2334, online at peoplespharmacy.com.
Today on The People's Pharmacy, we're talking about the power of games and the surprising health benefits you could glean from a gameful mindset.
Our guest is Dr. Jane McGonigal. She is a senior researcher at the Institute for the Future in Palo Alto, California. Her first book was Reality is Broken: Why Games Make Us Better and How They Can Change the World. Today, we're discussing her new book, SuperBetter: A Revolutionary Approach to Getting Stronger, Happier, Braver, and More Resilient. Her website is SuperBetter.com.
Dr. McGonigal, you've just described how you created a game, Jane the Concussion Slayer, to help yourself recover from this brain injury. And you used a couple of terms that perhaps not all of our listeners will be familiar with. Some of them will be super familiar, and they'll say, why is Terry asking such a stupid question? But please explain to us what you mean by power-ups. I think everybody understands bad guys, and what you mean by quests.
Sure. So when you play most video games, there's an opportunity to collect something called a power-up. So if you're playing Super Mario, there might be a mushroom, and that when you collect that mushroom, it makes your avatar in the game bigger and stronger and invincible for a short period of time. People will know Pac-Man as a reference. When you eat that power pellet and then you can gobble up the ghosts instead of the ghost being able to eat you, that's a power-up. It's something that gives you a temporary boost that makes you stronger, faster, feel better, more effective. And so when you bring that idea to everyday life, what you're doing is you're trying to find what are the things I can collect that I can turn to when I'm feeling anxious or stressed or depressed, or I need that extra boost of physical or mental energy. So, they're really simple things like watching videos of baby animals, which has been proven in the scientific literature to actually improve your attention and productivity, because that burst of positive emotion you feel when you're just drawn into looking at that animal, it actually sharpens and focuses your attention and improves your productivity. So that's something you can collect. You can have a website or photos on your phone that you just activate when you need it. A quest is just, it's a way to move forward towards your goal, a way to acquire a new resource, improve a skill or ability, or just get a little closer to your goal. And game designers work really hard when they design quests to make sure that the level of difficulty is really finely tuned. You're never given a quest that's impossible for you to accomplish. And so in everyday life, this really just looks like figuring out how to design daily goals for yourself that are true to your values and your priorities. What are the things that matter most to you? Maybe you want to be a lifelong learner and learn something new every day. Maybe you want to use your creativity to inspire others. So you want to make something creative every day and share it on social media. A quest helps you identify what is the smallest thing that you can do that makes sure that you're putting time and energy towards your deepest priorities and values. And, if you're in pain, if you're injured or have an illness, it can be really hard to think of anything you can do that will feel like you're doing something worthwhile. In my experience, one of the quests that I was given was to bake cookies for baristas at the coffee shop that I lived above. And that was great. I couldn't do any productive work, but I realized I could make someone else happy. And that was a breakthrough for me when they were so surprised. I can't believe you come in here with this plate of fresh out of the oven cookies for us. Just being able to identify things that you can do that will really be true to your values. One of mine was making other people happy.
Dr. McGonigal, I really understand this idea of, a quest and trying to get stronger or better or faster. Goodness knows, I spent a lot of time playing Angry Birds, and I know what it's like when you move on to the next level. It's really great. And I'm a tennis player. I mean, I love playing tennis.
Me
and
too.
I love when I win. And sometimes when I lose, I go, oh, I can't believe how bad I was. How could that happen? So just out of curiosity, is there an upside to losing at games?
Oh, yes. I mean, this is actually, I use tennis in my life expressly for that purpose. I play tennis with my husband as often as we can, once a week in the summer, and he always beats me 6-1, 6-0. I mean, he's a very tall man and powerful server, and I'm lucky to even get a game off of him. And I use that in my life to work on my resilience. It is a real skill and ability to be able to stay wholeheartedly engaged in a game that you are just not that good at, and to focus on the possibility of improving or achieving your own goals rather than focusing on the overall loss, right? Because I never expect to win. And so it helps me practice that mindset of, even if I can't control the outcome, even if I'm going to fail, there are still things that I'm improving or getting better at. So, in a way, we should really embrace failure. This is actually pretty interesting. There's been research done at one of the best gaming research labs in Finland showing that many gamers are more excited and have a more positive mood after they fail in a game than when they succeed, if they're given another chance to try. So if there's no second chance, no try again, get better, then they're not happy that they failed. But in video games, you can just try again. And it turns out that that's actually more engaging because we're more excited by the chance to learn and get better than we are by winning.
Well, you've talked about how important it is to be engaged. And you mention in SuperBetter the significance of being engaged in, for example, a really visually compelling video game and how it can have health benefits. Would you tell us about that research, please?
Sure. There are a number of research groups studying this phenomenon. The first group was at Oxford University, actually. They've completed 3 studies now looking at how a very visually engaging video game like Tetris or Candy Crush Saga, if that's more your style, can prevent some of the most difficult to treat symptoms of PTSD. What they found is that if you play a game like Tetris for 10 minutes within 24 hours of witnessing or experiencing a traumatic event, that it can reduce the number and the severity of flashbacks that you experience. And that is the hardest to treat symptom of PTSD. The reason why it works is that after you experience or witness something traumatic, your brain can fixate on what you saw, and it's replaying in your mind's eye that trauma. If you preoccupy the visual processing center of your brain with the kind of game that is so visually intense that when you close your eyes, you see flashbacks of the game. So anybody who's played Tetris, you close your eyes and you will see the puzzle pieces falling. Or after you play Candy Crush for a while, you'll look up at the ceiling and you'll like hallucinate Candy Crush pieces that you have to swap. Any game like that, your brain will be so preoccupied and will essentially be having flashbacks of the video game instead of the trauma. And they've done 3 studies now showing in a laboratory setting that this is effective. So that is something that I try to communicate to people. Get one of these games on your phone or your tablet so that if you need to avoid, unwanted thoughts, unwanted flashbacks, that you have access to it. Everybody should have a game that they can turn to at that time.
Now, your big game is SuperBetter, and I'd like you to tell us a little bit more about it. Walk us through how it's played. And then, if you don't mind, tell us how SuperBetter has affected you, how you may have changed since you started treating yourself, in quotes, treating, with this game called SuperBetter.
Well, and it's not just me. More than 500,000 people now have played the online version of the game, and we've collected data. My team, and we've worked with researchers at the University of Pennsylvania and Ohio State University Medical Research Center to really study the effects of adopting this gameful mindset. And the way you play, it's not a video game It's really a set of 7 rules that you are challenged to live your everyday life by. And these 7 rules are really simple. Like we said, things like collecting and activating at least 3 power-ups a day, designing for yourself and completing at least 1 quest a day. Remember, that quest is something that is really true to your values and priorities, that making sure you're putting time and energy every day to your deepest values and goals. We challenge you to do 1 bad guy battle every day. The idea there is that people tend to get stronger or recover faster, be happier and healthier when they're not avoiding negative experiences or feelings or physical pain, but rather continuing to do the things that are important to them and being able to acknowledge and, if necessary, embrace that they will have negative thoughts or feelings as a part of that. So we challenge you to do something that's hard for you once a day. And we encourage you to recruit allies. We found that inviting 2 people to play the game with you, so these are 2 people who will see your list of power-ups and help you activate them. They'll see your list of bad guys and help you strategize how to battle them. They will see the quests you design for yourself, and they will also give you quests. And that's the basic gameplay dynamic. 3 power-ups a day, 1 quest you design or that a friend designs for you, 1 bad guy battle, and that's how you get SuperBetter. And we've seen now from the randomized control study that we did at the University of Pennsylvania that there was a significant improvement in symptoms of depression. We did a study of 250 people who were clinically depressed. They got significantly happier, significantly less anxiety, and more self-efficacy, which is that feeling that you have control over the problems in your life, that you can really take action and make choices that can positively affect the outcome. And we found similar results with our NIH-funded clinical trial at Ohio State University, particularly with depression. The game seems to be very effective at reducing symptoms of depression. And that makes sense because when I designed it, that was really the biggest challenge that I was facing. It was the depression and anxiety.
Can you give us an example of a bad guy battle that someone might encounter?
We have a lot of young people who play the game. I'm thinking about a young college student who has just a lot of anxiety about his future. Is he going to be able to finish his degree? Is he going to be able to afford it? Will he ever get a job? And he just has a lot of anxiety. And, he writes about on the SuperBetter forums about how it keeps him up at night. And so his allies were giving him advice about, how do you battle this bad guy? And one of the strategies that we suggest to people is that they try to flip the bad guy, turn it upside down, turn it on its back, flip it, and see if you can see a benefit to it. And so, this young man, his name was Jose, he flipped it and said, all of this anxiety that I'm feeling, it just shows how much I care. I'm very motivated. I'm a very motivated person. I care a lot about being able to, make my parents proud, to achieve something for my community. And so instead of looking at those feelings as something he needed to fix or control, he flipped them and said, I'm going to use this as, a sign to myself that I'm on the right path, that I'm a passionate person, and identify it as a strength rather than a weakness. And that freed up for him mental and physical energy that was really being wasted and just kind of suffering.
What about your own personal bad guys? How have you dealt with them in the game?
I use this method at different times in my life for different challenges. Most recently, I just became a first-time mom. I have twin 6-month-old girls.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And they're doing great. They're super healthy, but they were born 10 weeks premature, and they're very tiny. They were 3-pound babies, and they were actually in the NICU for 2 months. And that was a really stressful time. And once my husband and I got over the shock of what was happening and being told that they were going to be in the hospital, for at least 8 weeks, my husband and I pulled out our notebook and started making lists of our power-ups for the NICU and our bad guys for the NICU. And, some of the bad guys were just skills we needed to learn. We learned about, when the baby's heart rate changes really suddenly. And, when that happens, you have to rub them on the back, to kind of wake them up and sort of stimulate their nervous system. And even though it was scary to see your baby's heart rate drop and maybe they start to turn blue, I mean, this is the reality that some people go through these difficult things. And instead of being overwhelmed and feeling powerless, you have to say, that's a bad guy. I'm going to battle every day for my baby, and I'm equipped with a strategy for handling it. And so, it's by being willing to really embrace the bad guys and approach them with confident strategies, it certainly allowed me to not, run away from the fear or the sadness of it and to really be present for it.
Now, Dr. McGonigal, you've mentioned depression, you've mentioned anxiety, and certainly having your babies in the NICU would be very stressful. What are some of the other health issues that can benefit from a game like SuperBetter? We're seeing people who are having a tremendous trouble sleeping these days. We're facing, an obesity epidemic. There are lots of people with chronic conditions like cancer or even something dreadful like ALS. Can SuperBetter help with any of those situations?
Yeah, I mean, there are stories in the book from people battling all of those challenges. And to me, it's very humbling to see, somebody who's fighting a disease like ALS, say a game is powerful enough. And I do want to spend my time playing this game to try to get better. One of the stories I tell in the book, a young man named Aaron Winborn, who contacted me shortly after he'd been diagnosed with ALS. And one of the first things he did was started playing SuperBetter because he wanted to really maximize the time that he had left. He wrote me and said, I don't expect to be alive in a few years, and I know it's going to be a difficult experience, obviously, going through this. But he had 2 young daughters, and he wanted them to have a positive memory of their time together, and he wanted to project an image of strength and optimism and creativity to them. And so he adopted his secret identity, and he started, he had to do physical therapy exercises that he talked about as being kind of Jedi warrior training exercises. So when his daughters would help him stretch his muscles, which was very painful and difficult, but he would turn it into this game with them that they would be able to help him and see him being strong and see him being positive. And, he passed away, and it's almost overwhelming, to see that even in the face of the worst thing you can imagine, that somebody can find strength in adopting an attitude of play. It runs counter to everything we think about games. Games are trivial. Games aren't serious. But it seems from everything I've seen over the past 5 years since I invented this game, that in a way, the more difficult the challenge, the more extreme the situation that you're in, the more a gameful mindset can help.
You're listening to Dr. Jane McGonigal, author of SuperBetter, a revolutionary approach to getting stronger, happier, braver, and more resilient, powered by the science of games.
In a minute, we'll discuss whether games are a waste of time. Find out how a game called Remission has been used to help kids with cancer.
You're listening to The People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon. If you value the health information you get when you listen to The People's Pharmacy, consider subscribing to our email newsletter. You'll get the latest health news and information on upcoming podcasts delivered to your inbox twice a week. Look for the link at peoplespharmacy.com. Welcome back to The People's Pharmacy. I'm Terry Graydon.
And I'm Joe Graydon. The People's Pharmacy is brought to you in part by Red X Industries, makers of utterly smooth foot cream with shea butter, helping dry, cracked feet feel soft and smooth. The number is 800-345-7339, online at uttercream.com.
And by Intra Naturals Nutritional Supplements. Information on how they're redefining nutrition can be found at intranaturals.com.
To order a CD of today's show or any People's Pharmacy broadcast, you can call 800-732-2334. Today's show is 1025. That number again, 800-732-2334, online at peoplespharmacy.com.
Today our topic is games. How can they unlock skills we can use in everyday life? How can you become the hero of your own story?
Our guest is Dr. Jane McGonigal, a senior researcher at the Institute for the Future in Palo Alto, California. Her new book is SuperBetter, a revolutionary approach to getting stronger, happier, braver, and more resilient, powered by the science of games.
Dr. McGonigal, did it surprise you that someone with so little time left, this young man with ALS who realized he might not be alive, he probably wouldn't be alive within a few years, that he would actually spend time in a gameful way? I mean, for centuries, maybe thousands of years, people have looked down their noses at games because they're a waste of time, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And it's funny, even Einstein, who was an avid player of chess, you can find letters where he writes to his colleagues that he's afraid that he's addicted to chess and that he's wasting too much time playing chess. So it is an age-old concern. And I actually hear from people all the time who have seen my work, but they say, I understand games can have benefits, but don't you think when someone's on their deathbed, they're not going to wish they spent more time playing Angry Birds? I cannot tell you how many times I heard that. I've heard that from literally 1,000 people. And so when Aaron wrote me, he actually said, I know most people will think it's crazy that somebody with so little time left will want to spend more time playing games. But I believe this is the best way to improve my quality of life and to make sure that I am having the best life possible. And it was after I heard from him that I ran across some research on what people actually regret on their deathbed. It was just a couple of months later, a hospice worker published a book about the most commonly expressed regrets that people have during hospice treatment when they're, literally at the end of their lives, and what are the regrets they express. And that's something I can share them with you now.
Oh, please do.
Okay, so these are the top 5 regrets of the dying. Number 1, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. Number 2, I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. 3, I wish I'd let myself be happier. 4, I wish I'd had the courage to express my true self. 5, I wish I'd lived a life true to my dreams instead of what others expected of me. What was so interesting when I saw this list was intuitively, I'm sure you hear it too, there's so many ways that making time to play games, especially playing games with friends and family, can address these ideas. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. For a lot of people, that means I wish I'd spent more time, with my kids when they were growing up, and that's a perfect time in your life to be spending playing games. Or I wish I'd stayed in touch with my friends. I mean, we know from research now that the rise of social network games, things like Farmville or Clash of Clans, they've actually turned out to be really effective relationship management tools. People who play these online games on their phone with distant friends and relatives become more likely to talk to those people about everyday topics, not just the game. They're more likely to see them in person, and they're more likely to ask for or get help with a real-life problem. And so that was just something I started diving into the research. I went through all of these regrets and found years of academic research showing that gameplay really do provide the kind of benefits that can help you make sure that you are spending your time doing the things that make you happy, connecting with the people that are important to you, and developing the psychological strengths that really can help you lead a life that's truer to your dreams.
I would like to ask you about a study that really fascinated me. You write about a game called Remission, in which a robot named Roxy shoots down bad guys. Tell us a little bit more about this research, please.
Sure. This was a game created by a nonprofit called Hope Lab, they're based in Palo Alto, California. And the game Remission, which is free to download, and they actually have mobile versions now. There's a sequel called Remission 2. And these games are designed to help young people who are fighting cancer in real life. And the games give you an opportunity to have a really empowering experience of things like chemotherapy. So, when you control Roxy, the nanobot, your avatar is navigating inside the human body, and your weapons are things like chemotherapy and antibiotics. And the game is designed really carefully to make sure that the young players understand how these medications work and the importance of never missing a dose. Because in real life, when you miss doses of this medicine and kids have to take it for years, you can have to go home and take pills every day for years to keep the cancer in remission. If you miss doses, that is associated with the cancer coming back. So it's important to never miss a dose. But almost half of young cancer patients miss doses. So the creators of this game were trying to reduce that from happening. And so the game is designed so that if you don't fire up your chemotherapy weapon on the exact right schedule, it will misfire. And when your weapon misfires, the cancer cells start to get stronger. And so the level actually gets more and more challenging the more doses you miss. And it gives them this sort of really intuitive sense of how it works. But they also get to, blow stuff up and have that really positive emotion of really seeing visually represented on screen. They are destroying their cancer. And what they found in a clinical trial that they ran was that kids who played this game did miss fewer doses. They had electronic pill cap monitors. They also measured blood. They drew blood to measure the amount of the chemotherapy medications in their bloodstream. And kids who played this video game had more of the medication. They missed fewer doses. And that was really the biggest impact that we've seen of how do you help people who are fighting a disease tap into their ability to never miss a dose and really do the things that matter.
Dr. McGonigal, a lot of our listeners may not have grown up playing video games, and they may not quite understand what a gameful way of life would be like. So how would you encourage people to begin dabbling their toes in gaming? What would be a good way to start?
Well, first of all, you can have a gameful mindset from any kind of game. So I would imagine most people do have a game that they love or they have loved at some point in their life, whether it's jigsaw puzzles or poker or bridge or golf or soccer. If there is a game that you love, you do know what a gameful mindset is. You know that feeling of being inspired to do something difficult, that optimism that you can come from behind, that sense of physical energy and mental focus that you have, and that resilience when things go wrong to keep trying and being wholeheartedly engaged with a challenge. All of that is the gameful mindset. So you can play any game. It doesn't have to be a video game to start to really practice and develop it. And the easiest way to start bringing that gameful mindset to everyday life is just to ask yourself, what does it take to be good at this game? What makes it hard? What are the skills or strengths required to do well? And then to think, what else in my life could those same strengths and skills be a good resource for, at school, at work, in a hobby, in my family life? That's all you need to do. You don't have to play a video game. You can play any game and just start to ask yourself, what are these strengths? Because it turns out that if you can identify them clearly, you're more likely to activate them in everyday life.
Dr. McGonigal, I think a lot of parents are concerned about video games because they see this as a sedentary activity. Yeah. And I'm wondering if there's a way to find a healthy balance between a game that would encourage physical activity as well as these video games which encourage a lot of mental activity.
There's just a new study that came out a couple of weeks ago showing that many of the video games that kids love, dance games like Just Dance or the Wii Sports games, that kids actually burn more calories and take more steps playing the video games than during a typical playground recess. So they measure the physical activity and steps of kids just at normal recess on the playground and then playing a video game for the same amount of time. So that's good news for parents to know that you can get just as much physical activity playing a video game. It just has to be one of the games that has kids up and moving. You can also just, have more balance. In my own life, I have a rule that I have to have an hour of physical activity, like walking with my dogs, for every hour of video game time that I play. That's the rule in my house.
That sounds like a great rule. Another thing that I found fascinating in SuperBetter was the research showing that parents playing video games with their kids actually are more connected with them. Can you tell us a little more about that? I think some parents would be surprised and interested.
Yeah, there have been a number of studies looking at that. One of the best known came out of Brigham Young University's School of Family Life Research. And they found that within households where parents were playing with their kids, particularly dads playing with their daughters, there seemed to be an even more pronounced effect. That it strengthened the relationship, that they were able to communicate more effectively. The kids would be more likely to come to their parents for help with a real-life problem. The kids also had, fewer behavior issues. And there's lots of reasons, why that would happen. It makes perfect sense to have that quality time together where you're focusing on the same challenge. You're getting to see each other in this role of being strong and determined, where you might have to cooperate together if you're playing a cooperative game, and where you get activating these positive emotions that we get when we play games, like excitement and pride and curiosity and wonder. To have those shared positive emotions is really important. And, there's really nothing that kids, by the way, like better than teaching their parents how to do something. And so often kids are better at video games than their parents. So it gives this wonderful opportunity for your kid to have that pride in knowing something, doing something better than their parent. That can be a really positive and sometimes even healing experience to kind of reverse that dynamic for a while.
Dr. McGonigal, there are a lot of parents who think, wow, my kid is playing 4 or 5 hours on a weekend, maybe even just in a day. Are they addicted to these games? What about this notion of video game addiction? Is it something that parents should be concerned about?
Video game addiction is a real phenomenon. Games provide a really powerful dopamine boost that is similar to other addictive substances. And it's why so many people who experience depression in particular may find themselves trying to escape their real lives and turning to video games. And if you do use video games as that kind of escapist crutch, that's actually the number one predictor of becoming addicted. The way to avoid addiction is to play with purpose, meaning to really focus on how you're improving, what you're learning, what you're getting better at whenever you play a game. And by thinking about the ways that you're getting better, in the research that seems to predict people being able to keep their play in balance and bring their gameful strengths to everyday life instead of just becoming addicted. And what I always tell parents is that we know from every study that's ever looked at the issue of what will harm kids with video games, if the gaming is over 20 hours a week, that's where you start to see problems. So on average, 3 hours a day or 20 hours a week, that amount of gaming can take away enough time from other physical activity, schoolwork, relationships with people who aren't playing games, in a way that there can be negative impacts. So I tell parents, that's the limit, that's the tipping point. Keep it under 20 hours a week. If you have a child who really feels like they're suffering from a game addiction, don't take the games away. It's going cold turkey is like taking someone off an antidepressant without tapering them. Just get the hours under 20 hours a week, and that's where you start to see the benefits kick back in.
Dr. McGonigal, in summing up the research that you've done and the games that you have helped create and this wonderful book, SuperBetter, why is play so important to good health?
When we play games, we tap into some of the most positive qualities of ourselves. We're more motivated, we're more determined, we learn faster, we bounce back from setbacks, we team up more effectively, we have that sense of creative agency that we can try new things and that we can learn from our mistakes. All of those powerful ways of thinking and acting are ways that we should bring to our real life challenges. And, we spend our whole lives thinking that play is not serious. We're told that the opposite of play is work. But what we know now from so many years of research is that the opposite of play isn't work. The opposite of play is depression. And if you want to lead a life with more energy, more determination, more optimism, that play is a really important part of your everyday.
Dr. Jane McGonigal, thank you so much for talking with us on the People's Pharmacy today.
This was fun. Thank you.
You've been listening to Dr. Jane McGonigal. She's a senior researcher at the Institute for the Future in Palo Alto, California. Her first book was Reality is Broken: Why Games Make Us Better and How They Can Change the World. Today, we've been discussing her new book, SuperBetter, a revolutionary approach to getting stronger, happier, braver, and more resilient, powered by the science of games. Her website is SuperBetter.com.
Lynn Siegel produced today's show. Al Wadarski is the engineer. Dave Graydon edits our interviews.
The People's Pharmacy is produced at the studios of North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC.
The People's Pharmacy theme music is by B.J. Liederman.
The People's Pharmacy is made possible by Red X Industries, makers of Utterly Smooth Extra Care 20 Cream with 20% urea for extra skin protection. The number's 800-345-7339. The website is uttercream.com.
And if you would like to purchase a CD of today's show or any other People's Pharmacy broadcast, you can call 800-732-2334. Today's show is number 1025. That number again is 800-732-2334. You can also place the order online at peoplespharmacy.com.
And when you visit our site, you can check out information on prescription drugs, herbal medicines, and home remedies. Share your own experience and your thoughts on today's show. What are your favorite games? For me, it's tennis.
When you go to our website, you can also sign up for our free online newsletter or the free podcast of the show. You need never miss another People's Pharmacy program, and you can share it with a friend. It's all there at peoplespharmacy.com.
In Durham, North Carolina, I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. Thank you very much for listening today, and please join us again next week when we discuss how women can keep their hearts healthy.
We hope you enjoyed this podcast. If so, please consider taking a minute to write a review on iTunes. And thanks for listening to The People's Pharmacy.